The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The South Holland series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles, 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Welcome back to South Holland again, everybody. I am so excited to be in this particular parish today because I've been looking forward to this one for such a long time. We are going on an adventure in this place. I'm going to be taking at least 2.5 hours to walk around this entire place. We're going for a long walk, and there's loads to talk about. This is the parish of Surfleet. Surfleet, Sour Stream. Wrapping up this run in South Holland, and what a run it's been by the way, we have the village and parish of Surfleet, 3 miles north of Spalding in the Lincolnshire Fens. Now Surfleet is a fun one. It's centred around a river which we last saw in South Kesteven, the Glen, except here it's far wider and a lot more prominent. When we last encountered it, the Glen, or West Glen, was a mere trickle of a stream as I made my way over it in Countthorpe and Cretan. At Surfleet it becomes tidal at a sluice gate in the hamlet of Surfleet Seas End. The existence of the river here is what gives Surfleet its name. It literally means sour stream or damp creek. There's a lot to talk about in this one. The route of the Glen forms the majority of the episode, but Surfleet has far more than that. At one time it had a railway station, but unlike Donington or Gosberton, the chances of it ever reopening are precisely zero. The line is now lost, buried underneath the A16, which swipes its way through the parish, splitting Surfleet from Seas End. The churchyard is a key landmark here. In there is the grave of a murder victim, Samuel Stockton, whose headstone tells of his demise. He was killed for his money in 1768, a crime for which the perpetrator was hung and gibbeted for. We'll tell his story as we walk and take in the village hall, a swimming pool, a park, a school, and some pubs in the process. This is actually a pretty lengthy walk too. I opted to amble the entire length of Surfleet village, which is well over a mile end to end. Let's get moving and learn some facts. We start in Surfleet village on the B1356. There are several points of interest along here, the first of which is the Surfleet War Memorial, dedicated in 1921 to honour those who died in World War I. The memorial is a 17-foot tall cross and it has a link to Rutland. It's made of Clipsham stone. The memorial was erected by Bowman and Sons of Grantham. A bit further down the road is the Frasier Room. There's a story behind this building. In 1764, Lady Anne Frasier founded a charity to provide free education for 20 Surfleet children of both sexes. To this end, a simple building was provided to house the school, which operated between 1764 and 1870. The charity's trustees were the vicar and church wardens of Surfleet, the vicar of Pinchbeck, the vicar of Gosberton, and the rector of Algakirk. The charity school would eventually close, but today it continues to play a prominent role in the life of the village. Now called the Frasier Room, it's since attracted significant grant funding to refurbish the main hall area. It's now a community meeting room used by a number of local groups. You can think of it therefore as kind of a village hall type establishment. Now to the church, and this is where we'll encounter a pretty gruesome story behind the grave of a man who's buried in the churchyard. The Church of St Lawrence is situated exactly 2.5 miles between the nearby villages of Gosberton to the north and Pinchbeck to the south. It's one of the few in England to possess a peal of 12 bells. The tower here is instantly noticeable, leaning as it does 6 foot 4.5 inches out of perpendicular. The reason for the lean is because when the tower and spire were built, the sheer weight of them caused the building to sink into the soft fenland soil. That's the real reason for it anyway, but it didn't stop local legend saying something else. Depending on who you talk to, some say it's because it once bowed to a passing knight. But people, you believe what you want. So to that gruesome tale. The churchyard here contains a gravestone in memory of a murder victim by the name of Samuel Stockton. In 1768, Stockton was lured from northwest England to Lincolnshire by a farmer from Gedney Hill. The first name of the farmer isn't known, but his surname was Hooton. Hooton passed himself off as a preacher and brought Stockton to the Fens on the pretext of a business deal that never actually happened. Instead, he killed Stockton for his money near Common Marsh Bank. Hooton was executed at Lincoln for the crime and hanged in a gibbet cage close to the spot where he committed it. The story is told in very faint letters on Stockton's stone. Although almost illegible, it remains a tale which makes Surfleet an infamous murder location. Over the road is the Crown Inn. This little gem of a pub, tastefully refurbished, has comfortable settees and couches in the bar and lounge area, close to its large open fire. The adjacent mezzanine floor with its intimate area adds to the ambience, as does a grand piano in its restaurant. Step inside this one alone and you might think twice if you spot Lana, reputedly the most frequent regular the pub has. Her ghost has haunted the pub since being run over by a stagecoach bound for London. Here's a fun fact for you, by the way. Apparently, the first ever Morris dancing was held outside this pub in 1796. You might be able to hear the church bell at the moment. Timed this wrong, didn't I? There's a funeral just finished inside the church right now. That's why the bell's going and going. Done my best to avoid everybody coming out of the church, as you do, you know, mark of respect and all that. I would have taken my hat off, but it's so cold. To be honest with you, you know what, actually, there we go. At least I've taken it off now, just for a couple of moments anyway. Anyway, next up we've got a river. You can see there behind me. Now we actually know this river already, because this we've seen before in South Kesteven, but last time we saw it, it was a mere trickle. Look at it now. It's massive, it's wide. That's the River Glen, and we're going to follow this for quite a long way. This is Glen Park, which takes its name from the river which runs through Surfleet to the Wash. It's some 10 acres in size and has a public children's play area, outdoor gym equipment, picnic areas, a sensory garden, an outdoor classroom, and a wheelchair-friendly woodland trail. The park's all-weather grass and sports pitches are used by hockey and football teams, the latter including Spalding Hockey Club. Simply known as SHC for short, they are the biggest hockey club in Lincolnshire. They were formed in 1953 and moved to their current pitch in Surfleet in 2009. With the move came an opportunity to develop the club's youth section via a tournament for local school children. At the time, there were 8 teams from 7 local schools participating in 2 leagues on quarter-sized pitches. Teams were 6 aside, boys and girls, with no goalkeepers and no gender restrictions. With a recommended squad maximum of 10, there would have been about 60 youngsters playing. The umpires in the early days were senior club members. This tournament set the foundations for the years to come, and gradually the word spread. Year by year, more schools participated, and by 2016, the club were running 5 tournaments through the school year, with each being full, 20 teams from 14 local schools. Hockey is definitely a burgeoning sport in South Holland. Now, as good as the Frasier Room is at being a communal venue, Surfleet can boast 2 of them. Here we have the Village Hall. Surfleet Village Hall was registered as a charity on August 10th, 1965. I couldn't find a lot about this one, but no matter. It's a worthwhile addition to Glen Park for a multitude of reasons. So we've seen a lot already, but there's lots more to come. You see, Surfleet is a very long, lengthy village. It's got to be at least 2 miles from end to end. And even then, that's not all of it, because there's a hamlet at the other end called Surfleet Seas End, which is also part of the parish, and we'll catch that at the very end of this episode. So we're not even a quarter of the way into this walk yet, because I'm going to follow the glen all the way up to where it meets the A16. And that's the point where I'll turn around and come back. There's a lot of plodding to do yet. Education is next on our agenda here. This is Surfleet Primary School. It was built in 1878 and has the appearance of a typical Victorian school. The original buildings are still used, as is the old schoolhouse, which has been refurbished and is now the office and reception. The building has been extended since opening to improve and expand its facilities. It now has 3 internal classrooms, a multi-purpose hall, a central library and a computer room. A further mobile building in the rear playground acts as a 4th classroom. It has 2 large hard surface playing areas, an environmental garden, a garden play area, and a large field used for sports and other recreational activities. The school has less than 90 pupils on roll, served by 4 full-time teachers. In 2008, the school entered a federation with another school, St Mary's C of E Primary in Weston. Okay, almost at the A16 now. We've almost made it to the other end of the village, or at least to the end of Surfleet village, because obviously, like I said, Surfleet Seas End is beyond the A16. If you live up this end of the village, you don't have to go all the way to the other end to find a shop, because there's one here, and that's also a post office as well. It's in shot now, and you can see the glen on the right hand side too. You can also see a house, or it looks like a house, there. Now, what do you think that is? I guarantee you, all your guesses will be wrong. Where the road splits, the left-hand fork runs off towards the A16, but it's the right-hand fork we're going to follow. This brings us to the Riverside, a pub which used to be associated with the railway network. It was built in the 1850s and was originally known as the Great Northern Hotel. Its name survived until the late 1980s, when it was renamed the Riverside Hotel. You'd be pretty hard pushed to know its connection to the railways though. There's no railway line here after all, but there used to be. The modern A16 is known at this point as the Spalding Bypass. It was built along the course of the former Great Northern Railway's Grimsby to Peterborough section of the good old Lincolnshire Loop line. Yes, once again, that line makes an appearance on TVI. The railway opened in the 1850s, and Surfleet was served by a railway station situated right next to the hotel. The station was a brick building with 2 platforms and sidings. Its signal box controlled the station, line points and signals. Surfleet was the first station north of what used to be a much busier station in Spalding. Regular trains linked Spalding to Boston and other destinations, meaning trains were quite frequent along this particular stretch. In addition to passengers, the station handled goods, and that was thanks to the River Glen. The Glen was used to transport agricultural products from the Fens to and from the railway. These were things like wheat, potatoes, flour and barley, and sugar beet was transported to Spalding's sugar beet factory. Fish and shellfish caught in the wash and landed at Surfleet Reservoir were also transported from Surfleet Station 2, usually via an early train to Billingsgate Market in London. The station was on one of the many lines across the country that was closed on recommendation of the Beeching Report, doing so in 1961. Goods traffic on the line ceased in 1963. The line itself survived until late 1970, when it was finally removed, leaving only the station buildings behind. They stood until 1994, when they were demolished to accommodate the building of the Spalding Bypass. I'm sure you heard the banging noises. That's traffic going across this bridge, and trust me, it doesn't have sound underneath there. It's frightened my life going underneath there thinking, what the heck is that noise? And that's exactly what it is. It's cars and lorries and everything else going across the bridge there. It's hard to believe that this used to be a railway line, you know, but there you go, it is. Close to the site of the station, Surfleet Parish also partly covers Spalding Golf Club. This was established in 1907, originally a Surfleet Golf Club. It operated a 9-hole layout on leased land that could not be played on in the summer months because the grass on the fairways was required for grazing. Over time, the course was doubled in size, but the onset of World War II reduced the playing area to one that could only accommodate 9 holes. In 1950, the club was able to purchase the land it had previously rented. It also acquired additional land to bring an 18-hole layout back into play at the start of the 1970s. Another tract of 34 acres was secured in 1989, allowing an in-house team of members to redesign the course, with its unveiling taking place in August 1993. Nowadays, the course extends to 6,092 yards from the back tees, playing to a par of 72. To make our way back to the beginning, we have to now follow the River Glen, and we can do that via a footpath which hugs its southern bank. For the most part, there's not much to see other than the river and the properties on the other side. However, about 40% of the way down this path will also encounter the Surfleet Slipway. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a ramp that allows boats to be launched into the river. However, it's very rare you get any people wanting to do that here, so that's nothing to worry about if you're just out here for a stroll. You can walk down the slipway too into the river, and it's not a straight drop into the water. Now apparently people bring their kids here to swim. I think that's very unlikely though, because I certainly wouldn't be setting foot inside this water, would you? Apparently dogs love it though. It's also the perfect place for a paddleboard too. Be aware, as with any river or water feature countrywide, it's advisable to exercise caution here. Only enter the water if it's completely safe. Now you can continue on that footpath and hug the side of the glen all the way back to the beginning, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow this road instead, because our next landmark is down here, and that looks a bit weird when you think that this is just a road that's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing on it. Well, there is if you walk for about half a mile or so in that kind of direction. Believe it or not, Surfleet has a place where you can go swimming. Whether or not people bathe in the glen, there is a place in Surfleet where you can swim in water that's a lot cleaner, if you know where to go. Further up Park Lane is the massive Park House. It has its own swimming pool which you can book to use. Privately owned, the indoor heated swimming pool is available for exclusive hire. Located in secluded grounds, the pool measures 30 feet by 12 and it has a uniform depth of 4.6 feet. It's heated to 30 degrees C throughout. I've included a link below to the Facebook page for Park Lane Pool. If you ever find yourself in the area and fancy a dip, this is the place to go for a proper good swim. It's healthy, you know. We're almost back at the start, but there's still a pub to discuss. That would be the Mermaid Inn, and it's on the other side of this bridge. As a pub, it must have done quite well for itself in its heyday. You see, this road we're on used to be the old route of the A16 before the Spalding bypass was built over the railway line. This would have originally been the only crossing point of the Glen and vitally important for travellers. It's no wonder there were maltings built so close to it. Where there's travellers, there's bound to be provisions for drinking, after all. The Mermaid Inn has a rich history, including its cellars, which allegedly date back to 1156. The inn itself is much newer. It was likely built in the late 18th or early 19th centuries. The inn's early history is largely unknown. It was advertised for sale in 1810 along with 60 acres of farmland. It later became associated with Surfleet Brewery, alternatively known as Surfleet Maltings. They were built to the south and west of the inn. In more recent times, it had to close at the start of the COVID pandemic, and it didn't reopen afterwards. It was put on the market for around £700,000, and now there are plans afoot to convert the old inn into either 5 flats or 2 semi-detached houses. Okay, we've almost made it around Surfleet. As you can see, we're back at the church, and we're stood underneath the bus shelter, which is right outside the church. And actually, from here, you can tell just how much that tower is leaning. It's a long way, isn't it? Look at the slant there. Amazing. Now, that's Surfleet Village, but we are not finished with this place yet by a long way, because Surfleet Seas End, to me, is the most interesting part of this entire episode. To finish this episode off, we have to take a look at the hamlet that sits to the east of the village on the other side of the A16. This is Surfleet Seas End, the location of a freshwater reservoir. Now, if you look on the map, you perhaps won't see the reservoir straight away. That's not surprising. It is, after all, one of the most misunderstood landmarks in the local area. Here's a brief history of it and why it's called a reservoir, even though it doesn't resemble one. At Surfleet Seas End, the River Glen meets the River Welland. Both rivers were originally tidal along their length. These two rivers, along with the Vernets and Blue Gout drains, meet at Surfleet Reservoir, where the Welland then flows along an improved cut towards Fosdyke Bridge and out into the Wash. The first sluice on the River Glen was built at Surfleet in 1739, and the first tidal sluice on the Welland was built at Spalding in 1953. The only other sluices at Spalding before then were at the end of Cubbit Wash, which were built and improved from the 17th century onwards. Historically, the Glen was always a slow-flowing river that also stagnated when it was backed up by tidal inflows. This is why the name Surfleet exists. It literally means sour or damp creek. One can only assume the stench of stagnant water was pretty bad. In 1729, Captain John Perry postulated that the only way to improve drainage was to improve the river outfalls. He proposed the construction of scouring sluices, one on the river at Spalding, one on Vernet's Drain at its outfall, and one on the River Glen at Surfleet. He died in 1733 before the works could be carried out. Revising Perry's plans in 1734, John Grundy, the renowned drainage engineer, produced a map of 22 miles of the River Welland and formulated the construction of a reservoir and sluice at its junction with the Glen. The idea was simple. A large head of water could be held behind a sluice and discharged in such a way that the resulting rush of water could be directed to scour the river below that point and remove the sedimentary shoals of silt. By 1737, these plans were put into action. At Surfleet, the reservoir, which covered 8 acres, was created, and a sluice with 3 openings spanning a 24-foot waterway at the mouth of the Glen was built 2 years later in 1739. Grundy continued to work on the Welland through Spalding until 1746, making the channel deeper and wider and carrying out other routine improvements at a cost of about £1,200 a year. It was also Grundy who proposed lengthening the Vernet's Drain and creating an outfall at Surfleet Reservoir, but these proposals were not implemented until 1774, long after his death. Although the idea of a reservoir was very good on paper, it didn't work very well. The reservoir was ineffectual because of the work done to improve the Welland downstream of Spalding. Due to that, it caused the sill of the Glen sluice to be too high, meaning it wasn't discharging into the Welland until it was high enough. However, a new sluice would not be built for another 50 years. Now, the reservoir theoretically doesn't exist now, but if you look on modern maps, you can see where it was. Notice here the curved shape of either side of the glen, which the roads follow to its north and south. Those would have been the edges of the reservoir. This map also shows the now canalised embankments of the Glen outfall and 2 ponds to the south of the Glen Sluice. They are the remains of a channel that was dug around the site of a new sluice so that it could be built dry. They were partially filled in when the old sluice was removed in 1880. There's still a pond on the landward side of the sluice today. The map also shows the new Glen Sluice or Reservoir Bridge, which was built in 1879. But why look at that here when you can walk on it? Let's do that, shall we? So, in a rather ridiculous fashion, it's this part of the episode that's got me so excited. When I wrote the script for Surfleet, this bit, it just left me in awe of how something so simple can be so interesting, if that makes any sense at all. What you're looking at here is, of course, the Glen, and to the left of shot is the Surfleet Sluice. And this is the point where the Glen becomes tidal. So here we have the new sluice, and at this point the Glen becomes a tidal river. On the landward side, it's fresh water. The total cost of the new sluice was £15,000, and to think that it's not needed any structural work in the last 140 odd years is quite remarkable and a testament to the architects and builders. The sluice doors have obviously been replaced at times, but the stone, concrete and brickwork have stood up to everything that the tides, winds and rain could throw at them. Here's a rundown of the materials which were used to build this very structure. It has 1,200 cubic feet of memel and pitch pine, ranging from 16 to 44 feet long and 12 to 14 inches square, about 400 sheeting piles, 3 inch by 11 inch and from 12 to 18 feet long, 1,000 red bricks and 300 blue bricks, about 40 navvy barrows, a 3-inch centrifugal pump with a 20-foot head of lift, and an 8 horsepower portable engine. And that lot is not including all the manpower. The sluice used to have a keeper in much the same way as canal locks did, and in some cases still do. In the 1961 obituary of former sluice keeper Smith Rout, better known as Mitt Walker, the Lincolnshire Free Press noted that the reservoir was once used for leisure purposes. In the 1920s, according to the document, George Samuel Kingston and his wife organised and popularised swimming at the reservoir. This claim is backed up by footage held by the Lincolnshire Film Archive, which has a 3.5-minute silent movie, simply titled Swimming at Surfleet Reservoir. It dates from 1927 and shows family footage, chiefly showing summer houses or beach huts which once populated the area around the sluice. One solitary hut survives from those times, and here it is. In the 1960s and 70s, it was used as a tool shed and workshop, and a place to keep fishing gear and eel traps. The large chalet behind it was built for Des Miles, MBE, the former head of the Welland and Deepings Internal Drainage Board in the 1980s. Swimming here was clearly a popular thing. It sort of made sense, really. Despite a public swimming pool officially opening in Spalding in 1934, it suffered several funding crises and wasn't always open. So instead, the locals made good use of the Glen by holding several swimming galas at Surfleet Reservoir during the 1930s and 40s. In August 1939, the Spalding Guardian reported that Spalding Grammar School held their sports at Surfleet Reservoir, favoured by some fine weather. In 1948, one Spalding Guardian article tells of a ladies' diving contest taking place, while another reports on a cork bobbing competition. Swimming as a leisure pursuit continued here until the 1950s. Living here is not without risk. Flooding does still occur, but then again, this area was never intended for permanent homes. As the reservoir basin was always designed to hold water, there are dozens of newspaper reports from the 19th century through to the present day telling of the Glen overflowing into it. Even now, if there's an exceptionally high tide the other side of the sluice, any floodwater simply has nowhere to go. Our final landmark is the one and only pub in Surfleet Seas End. This is the Ship Inn. It's thought to date back to around 1642, when Scottish and Irish prisoners of war and Dutch labourers were working on the drainage of the Fens. However, a map of this area in 1676 doesn't show the inn. The local drainage board owned the inn for many years until 1970, when it was sold. The ship is constructed in brick with a concrete tile roof. Some areas were extended in the 50s, and these bits have felt roofs instead. Upon examination, the building appears to have retained little obvious signs of its heritage apart from its brick shell. Tell you what folks, it ain't half been an adventure doing this one, and to be fair, doing the last 4 you've seen here in South Holland. I absolutely love the Fens. You know, being a Lincolnshire boy, you know, I kind of have to love them, don't I? Because I grew up in this very county, but not this part of the county, which is a bit strange, but it still feels like home to me, even though I'm actually from West Lindsey and not South Holland, but there we go. That's it for Surfleet, so let's head on out of here, and I'll see you again in the Fens very soon. Folks, that was a really interesting episode to write. For some reason, I absolutely love these watery places near the coast. They always have a really meaty story to them, and Surfleet has so much, doesn't it? It really makes you appreciate the landscape around you a bit more and how our ancestors tried to change it for the better. See you soon in South Holland. That's this little run over. Bye for now. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.